Hello, welcome to episode 2 of the huMAn Talk. If you saw episode 1, many thanks for coming back. If you didn't, go back, take a look, and you'll get a bit of an idea of what we're trying to do with these series of videos. This episode is one of our introducing series, where we will be introducing you to one of our guest presenters that we've got lined up. This episode is Paul Collison. Paul is from Sydney, Australia, and he runs 11 Design down there. And Paul does a lot of MA training down in that part of the world. Here's a brief look at what Paul gets up to normally. So without further ado, let's pass over to Paul in Australia there. Hey Paul, how are you doing?
G'day Lee, g'day everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're all doing well in your period of hibernation right now.
And we're all doing well here indeed. Thank you. So once again, thank you for taking part in this. Maybe you just want to give our viewers a brief overview as to who you are and what you get up to and your company 11 Design.
Right, yes, I run a company called 11 Design, based in Sydney, Australia. We do lighting design, of course. We also do a bit of production design. We also do motion graphic video content creation and replay. A lot of our video work is in instances where video is used as a lighting tool. So your shiny floor television shows like your X Factors and Voices and Got Talents and whatnot. We work all across the region, all across the world, wherever anybody will take us, we will go. A small but brilliant team of like-minded individuals that come together to create magic, hopefully.
Thanks for that, Paul. And I've also put a link to your website in the description below. So if anyone wants to go and check that out, they can. So let's get started. And I guess the first question is the typical one, and that is, how did you get started in this industry?
How did I get into the industry? Yes, that question. Look, I loved music from an early age. My parents opened me up to a wide array of different styles of music growing up. That progressed into a love of percussion and drums. I studied drums at school. I was in lots of bands. I was the guy who would sit in band rehearsal and make everyone turn the fluoros off and stick lights around the floor or light candles. I'd paint par 38s with oil-based paint. I don't know how we didn't die of asphyxiation. Those things were lethal, but it created a nice visual aesthetic, so I guess that was a bit of a win. So I was right into my music, and I think if anything, I always thought I was going to be a bit of a sound guy, but looking back on it now, I was always more interested in the visual aesthetic than I may have been in the sonic representation of what we were doing. So, as I grew up, I was volunteering at high school musicals and fashion shows, and that just developed into volunteering and working for local production companies, getting interested in controlling lights, not so much just setting up and pulling down, but also control and being a designer. And I grabbed a few opportunities and fortunately didn't make a total mess of them and somehow ended up here.
The fairy tale story there of the musician who grows up into the lighting designer and operator. Great stuff. So you mentioned there that your passion was for controlling the lights as well. So what would have been your first console in that case?
My first lighting console, I'm going to change that question to what was my first controller. As I said, I was playing in bands and was setting up lights around the rehearsal studios, but I always wanted the ability to be able to turn them off and turn them on so we could have different colors for different songs. What do you know? So I sat down with my grandfather in the garage one day and we built this little box with a whole bunch of switches in it and a whole bunch of outlets on it so that I could do just that. I pulled that box out a few years ago, and again, I don't know how I didn't kill myself. It had one 10 amp 240 volt input, and it had about 8 different outputs on it. And I heaven knows why I was plugging into it. But the fact that thing didn't catch fire and electrocute us all is a miracle. But outside of that, I think it was the old preset boards, the Instincts, the events. Jan's controllers in this part of the world were quite prolific in our industry, so we used a lot of those Jan's Instinct controllers, which then moved on to hogs and scan commanders and all sorts of things before looking at MAs in early 2000s.
Cool. It would be awesome to see that that box. Maybe it's a future add-on for the MA series. So you mentioned that your company there is based in Sydney, but with touring and all the travel that this job entails, where do you tend to call home?
I used to say home for me was a Rimmer suitcase, but no, home is definitely Sydney, Australia.
And another question is, what do your friends and family actually think you do?
My grandmother always thought that I made lampshades. It didn't matter how I tried to convince her otherwise, or anybody else in the family tried to convince her otherwise. I made lampshades. All my friends that I went to school with, whenever I catch up with them, it's always, oh, how's that sound thing going? So yeah, anybody outside of the industry, I generally don't even try and explain it too much, because it's just, I don't know why, but lighting design is just one of those completely unexplainable roles or jobs, and most people just kind of glaze over when you try to explain it.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. I think that's what makes this industry special, is that we all understand what one another does to some degree. However, who knows, that lampshade sideline might become useful pretty soon. Okay, so back to your work for a moment. How much of it is about the design element, and how much is it about all of the other aspects that go into putting on and making the final product?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first thing I thought of when you asked that question was that journey from, hey, can you come and design our show for us, to there's your show, is a long one, and your role kind of shifts as you progress through that journey. So starting off with, picking the right lights, creating a design, getting the right people involved, getting the right companies involved. That's probably the part of the process where you have the most value to the project. If there is a part like that, once you're on site, you do tend to lose a little bit of control because there are so many other factors that come into play. Resources are one of them. Changes, adapting to changes, changing timelines, all of those little things, the physical changes within the venue that you didn't know about before you got there. They're all things that you need to chop and change and adapt to. But at that point, you don't have as much control as you did at the beginning of the process. So at that point, you are becoming a leader, but your ability to massage the project is much more widely focused than it is at the beginning. And it's funny, on some shows I find by the time it actually gets to the show, you have become a passenger, because you have chosen the people, the lights and the design, you've installed it, you've programmed it. But once the show is happening, the show I did in January on the Gold Coast, I was taking photos because there was literally nothing for me to do once we hit showtime. So yeah, I think your responsibility really shifts across the duration of a project, and the things that you do and the way that you lead the project can change quite considerably from start to finish.
And so I guess with that, how do you prepare for each client?
I think each client requires a different set of love and attention. There's not a one-size-fits-all rule when it comes to communicating with different clients. The one thing they all have in common, though, is that, and people in general have in common, is that we're all very good at giving a solution to a problem. but not necessarily articulating what the problem might be. An example of that might be you're in a room and you ask somebody to open a window, they go and open a window and a big gust of wind comes through and blows the paperwork everywhere and causes carnage. Whereas if you'd have said, hey, I'm a little bit warm, is there anything we can do about this? Somebody smarter than you would probably say, hey, why don't we just turn the aircon on? And problem solved and everybody can move on. So I find that by asking lots of questions and trying to get to the root of what somebody is actually asking for or what their challenges might be is quite important. Because if you just take verbatim what somebody is asking you to do without diving into something a little further, then you quite often end up in a position where it looks like you haven't done your job properly. So I think in terms of preparation, it's asking lots of questions.
Indeed, wise words there, and I promise only a couple more of those questions. So how do you pick your clients? Is it based on a particular genre that you're comfortable with, or how does that happen?
That's a good question. One of the greatest things about being a designer in Australia and Southeast Asia is you tend not to get pigeonholed into one specific genre too much if you choose. So we can genre hop quite a lot. In any given week, I could be working on an opera and then the next night doing a corporate show, and then on the weekend doing a multi-camera video shoot. I probably prefer multi-camera broadcast work. I just find that environment exciting and interesting to me. But most importantly, it's about working with good people. I think we spend so much time on the journey to get to the destination that we really need to focus on the journey and that being enjoyable and bearable rather than just focusing on the end result. So for me, I actually don't mind what kind of show I'm working on as long as I'm doing it with good people and the journey is good and fun with a little bit of hard work thrown in.
And I guess that's what so many of us are missing right now, the hard work and the fun times with friends. And I guess once this is all over, things will change somewhat. I mean, how do you see the industry changing?
Yeah, I think we're going to be in a very different shape for a long time. I don't think even if there was a vaccine tomorrow and all of a sudden we're all allowed out to kiss and hug each other once again, it's going to take a while for things to ramp up. Touring is going to take at least 6 months to get back on its feet. People have got to book venues, people have got to sell tickets, people have got to want to part with their money to go and see an act. So the touring industry is going to take a while to get back on its feet. Likewise, the musical industry. The corporate world, which have just been hemorrhaging money since this thing started, aren't going to have a lot of cash flowing around to be able to invest in shows straight away, or at least large-scale shows straight away, unless they're a pharmaceutical company maybe. So I think the recovery is going to be a long and slow process. I have no doubt we will get back to where we were and move on to bigger, better and brighter things. But the recovery process is going to take a little while and we'll just have to see how long that is.
Yeah, and I guess we know that the general public always find theatres and rock and roll concerts and opera and film and TV are kind of a comfort to them. So I guess we just need to hold tight and be ready for when it all kicks off again. So on a more positive note, what would you say has been your sort of greatest achievement so far within the industry?
My biggest achievement to date, surviving, I think. Being able to do the projects that I do with the people that I do them with. There are some great shows that we've done. I remember doing a show in Abu Dhabi that was a massive stadium show, similar to not quite as big as an Olympic ceremony, but that style of show. And we had 41 days from the time the client said yes to the day we had to deliver the show. And that was an achievement in itself, being able to deliver a show like that. But you can reference things like that, but I think credit to anybody that can survive in this industry and be happy and have a life. Survival is definitely something that's up there with achievements.
Indeed, and I guess we're all trying to keep fit and busy and having small achievements in doing that each day until this is all over. So we've heard about you and your role within the industry. If I can be cheeky and ask, what has MA done through your career to help you at all?
I probably credit MA with a fairly big chunk of the reason why I am where I am today. I jumped onto Grand MA 1 very early in the piece, and I've got to say, not necessarily willingly. I was Grand MA 1 had been released. It was just Grand MA. It wasn't Grand MA 1. It was just Grand MA had been released in Australia, and local distributors, Show Technology in Australia, wanted me to go in and program the board up for their trade show stand, which I did, and spent the whole time whinging and complaining that it wasn't as good as my Hog 2. My Hog 2 is better. My Hog 2 this. My Hog 2 that. We did the show, and I still distinctly remember to this day going back to the Hog 2 the next week to do a show and thinking, oh, fantastic, back in my comfy armchair, here we go. Oh, the screens are black and white. Kind of miss that colour. Well, the screens aren't quite as responsive, are they? No. Oh, yep, that's it. I've hit the limit of lights that I can plug into this console. So there were a lot of things that when I jumped back onto the Hog 2, realised that maybe hadn't been as rosy as I'd thought. So therefore I jumped into the MA world, but of course there were lots of shows then that were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the Hogs at the day was still the most popular consoles, but maxed out at 4 universes, 6 with an overdrive, but anybody who tried that knew that that was never a great way to be. Slowed the consoles down too much and made them almost unworkable to a degree. So yeah, I definitely have to credit MA with a significant chunk of the reason why I'm here today.
And there we are. We leave it there with Paul. Paul, thank you so much for taking your time to answer those questions for us. Paul will be back very shortly. He is going to be taking us through the 3 generations of Grand MA consoles. He will also be back to answer a few more questions on favourite gadgets or favourite tools that help him with his workflow. So we look forward to that very soon. We also will have some other guests. We've got a couple of guests from the United States who will be introducing themselves very shortly. They will also be sharing experiences and tips and tricks and what keeps them sane, either when at front of house or in lockdown. So we look forward to those as well. And don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of when we post more videos. As you may have seen, we've put a little call out for all of you to send us your videos of where you are, what you're up to. There is a link in the description for that, so please go there and send us what you're up to. We'd love to see you here on this channel and take part. This is, after all about you guys and the MA family. So that's it for episode 2. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you soon. Please stay safe, and we'll see you very soon. Thanks.